Chapter 20. Patched by a blue inundation that had never been seen before this earth early in the 60s of the 19th century. Then faintly from far away, this new appearance is seen to be enveloped with volumes of gray. Flashes like lightning and faintest of rumbling sounds, then cloud-like envelopments roll away, and a blue formation shines in the sun. Meteorologists upon the moon take notes, but year after year there are appearances as seen from the moon that are so characterized that they may not be meteorologic phenomena upon this earth, changing compositions wrought with elements of blue and of gray. It is like conflict between synthesis and disillusion, straight lines that fade into scrawls, but that reform into seeming moving symbols, circles and squares and triangles abound. Having had no mean experience with interpretations as products of desires, given that upon the moon communication with this earth should be desired, it seems likely to me that the struggles of hosts of Americans early in the 60s of the 19th century were thought by some lunarians to be maneuvers directed to them or attempts to attract their attention. However, having had many impressions upon the resistance that new delusions encounter, so that, at least upon this earth, some benignments have had to wait centuries before finally imposing themselves generally, I think of considerable time elapsing before the coming of a general conviction upon the moon that, by means of living symbols and the firing of explosives, terrestrians were trying to communicate. Beacon-like lights that have been seen upon the moon. The lights have been desultory, the latest of which I have recorded was back in the year 1847, but now, if beginning in the early 60s, though not coinciding with the beginning of unusual and tremendous manifestations upon this earth, we have data as if of greatly stimulated attempts to communicate from the moon. Why one assimilates one's impressions of such great increase with this or with that, all according to what one's dominant thoughts may be, and calls the product a logical conclusion. Upon the night of May 15th, 1864, Herbert Ingle of Camberwell saw a little to the west of the lunar crater Picard in the Mare Crisium a remarkably bright spot. October 24th, 1864, period of the nearest approach by Mars, red lights upon opposite parts of Mars. Upon October 16th, Ingle had again seen the light west of Picard. January 1st, 1865, a small speck of light in darkness under the east floor of the lunar Alps, shining like a small star, watched half an hour by Charles Grover. Excuse me. January 3rd, 1865, again the red lights of Mars. A thread of data appears as an offshoot from a main streak, but it cannot sustain itself. Lights on the moon and lights on Mars, but I have nothing more that seems to signify both signals and responses between these two worlds. April 10th, 1865, west of Picard, according to Ingle, a most minute point of light glittering like a star. September 5th, 1865, a conspicuous bright spot west of Picard. It was seen again by Ingle. He saw it again upon the 7th, but upon the 8th it had gone, and there was a cloud-like effect where the light had been. November 24th, 1865, a speck of light that was seen by Reverend W.O. Williams shining like a small star in the lunar crater Caroline. June 10th, 1866, a star-like light in Aristarchus reported by Temple. Astronomically and selenometeorologically, nothing that I know has ever been done with these data. I think well of taking up the subject theologically. We are approaching accounts of a different kind of changes upon the moon. There will be data seeming so to indicate not only persistence but devoteness upon the moon that I incline to take not only of devoteness but of devotions. Upon the 16th of October, 1866, the astronomer Schmidt of the land of Socrates announced that the isolated object in the eastern part of the Mare Serenitatis, known as Lean, had changed. Lean stands out in a blank area like the pyramid of Cheops in its desert. If changes did occur upon lean, the conspicuous position seems to indicate selection. Before October 1866, lean was well known as a dark object. Something was whitening an object that had been black. A hitherto unpublished episode in the history of theologies. The new prophet who had appeared upon the moon. Faint perceptions of moving formations, often almost rigorously geometric upon the part of this earth, and perhaps faintest of signal-like sounds that reached the moon, the new prophet, and that he preached the old lunar doctrine that there is no God but the earth god, but exhorted his heirs to forsake their altars upon which had burned unheeded lights, and to build a temple upon which might be recited a litany of lights and shades. We are only now realizing how the earth god looks to the beings of the moon, who know that this earth is dominant, who see it frilled with the loops of the major planets, its Elizabethan rough wrought by the complications of the asteroids, the busy little sun that brushes off the dark. God of the moon, when mists make it expressionless, a vast, bland, silvery Buddha. God of the moon, when seeing is clear, when the disguise is off, when at night from pointed white peaks drip the fluctuating red lights of a volcano, this earth is the appalling god of carnivorousness. Sometimes the great roundish earth with the heavens behind it broken by refraction looks like something thrust into a shell from external existence, clouds of tornadoes as if in its grasp, and it looks like the fist of God clutching rags of ultimate fire and confusion. That a new prophet had appeared upon the moon and had excited new hope of evoking response from the bland and shining stupidity that has so often been mistaken for God, or from the appalling that is so identified with divinity, from the clutched and menacing fist that has so often been worshipped. There is no intelligence except era intelligence. Suppose the whole geosystem be a superembryonic thing. Then, by the law of embryo, its parts cannot be organized until comes scheduled time. So there are local congruities of development of a chick and an egg, but these local centers cannot more than faintly sketch out relations with one another until comes the time when they may definitely integrate. Suppose that far back in the 19th century there were attempts to communicate from the moon, but suppose that they were premature. Then we suppose the faint of the protoplasmic threads that feel out too soon from one part of an egg to another. In October 1866, Schmidt of Athens saw and reported in terms of the concepts of his era and described in conventional selenographic language. See Rept. B.A. 1867. Upon December 14th, 16th, 15th, December 14th, 16th, 25th, 27th, 1866, Lian was, that's Linne, was seen as a white spot. But there was something that had the seeming more of a design or of a pattern and elaboration upon the mere turning to white of something that had been black, a fine black spot upon Lian, by Schmidt and Buckingham in December 1866. The most important consideration of all is reviewed by Schmidt in the Report BA 1867-22, that sunlight and changes of sunlight had nothing to do with the changing appearances of Lian. January 14th, 1867, the white covering, or at least seeming covering of Lian had seemingly disappeared. Knott's impression of Lian as a dark spot, but definition was poor. January 16th, that is today, Knott's very strong impression, which, however, he says may have been an illusion of a small central dark spot upon Lian. Dawes' observation of March 15th, 1867, an excessively minute black dot in the middle of Lian. A geometric figure that was white bordered and centered with black, formed and dissolved and formed again. I have an impression of spectacles that were common in the United States during the war. Hosts of persons arranging themselves in living patterns, flags, crosses, and in one instance, in which thousands were engaged in the representation of an enormous Liberty Bell. Astronomers have thought of trying to communicate with Mars or the Moon by means of great geometric constructions placed conspicuously, but there is nothing so attractive to attention as change, and a formation that could appear and disappear would enhance the geometric with the dynamic. That the units of the changing compositions that covered Lean were the lunarians themselves, that Lean was terraced, hosts of the inhabitants of the moon standing upon the ridges of their Cheops of the serene seas, some of them dressed in white and standing in a border, and some of them dressed in black, centering upon the apex, or the dark material of the apex left clear for the contrast, all of them unified in a hope of conveying an impression of the geometric as the product of design and distinguishable from the topographic to the shining God that makes the stars of the heavens marginal. It is a period of great activity or of conflicting ideas and purposes upon the moon, new and experimental demonstrations, but also, of course, the persistence of the old. In the Astronomical Register 5-114, Thomas G. Elger writes that upon the 9th of April, 1867, he was surprised to see upon the dark part of the moon a light like a star of the 7th magnitude. At 7:30 p.m., it became fainter and looked almost extinguished at 9 o'clock. Mr. Elger had seen lights upon the moon before, but never before a light so clear. Too bright to be overlooked by the most careless observer, May 7th, 1867, the beacon light of Aristarchus observed by Temple of Marcellus when Aristarchus was upon the dark part of the moon. Upon the night of June 10th, 1867, Dawes saw 3 distinct roundish black spots near Sulpicus Gallus, which is near Lean. When looked for upon the 13th, they had disappeared. August 6th, 1867, and this earth in the sky of the moon, smooth and bland and featureless, earth, or one of the scenes that make it divine and appalling, jaws of this earth, as seen to be rims of more or less parallel mountain ranges still shining in sunlight but surrounded by darkness. And upon the moon, the assembling of the Characterized, or the lunar communicationists who seek to be intelligible to this earth by means of lights and shades patterned upon Lin by their own forms and costumes. The Great Pyramid of Lin at night upon the moon, it stands out as a bold black triangulatory pointing to this earth. It slowly suffuses white, the upward drift of white-clad forms upon the slopes of the pyramid. The jaws of this earth seem to munch in a variable light. There is no other response. Devotions are the food of the gods. Upon August 6, 1867, Buckingham saw upon Lynn, which was in darkness, a rising oval spot. In October 1867, Lynn was seen to convex white as a convex white spot. Hold on, that might be good. Yeah.